Hey everyone, and welcome to the GRC Room for 5 questions. I'm Mike Andrews here once again with Karina Klever, and we're happy to welcome guest Garret Grajek, who is the founder and CEO of YouAttest. How are you doing today, Garret?
Greetings. How are we doing, Mike and Karina? This should be fun.
Yeah, we're looking to get right into it. So without further ado, let me pass it over to Karina for a brief intro and the first question.
Thanks, Mike. Garret, thank you so much for joining us. I'm Karina Klever, founder of Klever Compliance. We are a compliance management as a service provider across different industries and maturities. So Garret, I'm going to ask you your first question. So what part of cyber GRC do you believe that businesses struggle with the most?
I'm a little partial here, given that I'm an identity governance person. But to me, no question, from 1 to 10, identity compliance. Every single measure, be it HIPAA, SOC 2, GLBA, NYDFS, NERC, SIP, all say, do you know who you've given access to your sensitive data? Every single one. It's practically a cut and paste from, NIST CSF 2.0, Principle of Least Privilege, PRA 05, not that I know it. But that's not being done in companies. Companies struggle. And the wonderful people in compliance and security I talk to, they don't lie to me. They don't say, oh, no, Garret, we're doing a great job, was done in the SolarWinds. They mostly say, no, we're struggling there. So I don't think that's true in every sense of compliance, because a lot of it can be automated in sense with the simple checkbox tools. It's not true for identity compliance. You have to do a tool like YouAttest helps you, but I see that being the number one things that enterprise struggle with.
And I'm going to probably add to that 2 things. I'm going to say good access control, great access control relies on good data classification, meaning you know where your golden eggs are, and you're more tightly controlling the access to the most important data. And I think the second thing that we always tend to forget in access controls is it's logical is probably the most violating one, but physical access is important, as is system to system access. So that API that you set up years and years ago, check it, right? Because it might no longer be valid. You may not even have a contract anymore with that vendor you're sending your data to. So it's a good idea to have that inventory. Make sure that your passwords for those APIs are not single points of failure, because we've seen so many times where the one guy who had the password to the API, he hasn't been with the company 3 years and we're still siphoning data out. So just a good idea to maintain those things. Mike?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Identity is among my top 3 points of focus for the next 12 months. Probably number 1, followed by TPRM and then AI governance, because more companies are going to be impacted by identity simply for the fact that some companies don't do AI, right? And if we look at the cause of breaches, identity is always right up there, which helps us roll right into the second question for Garret. So Garret, we've seen a lot of breaches out there. We've talked to you about a lot of breaches. Which breach actually stands out to you the most, and why that one?
To me, in 2025, the number 1 breach was, to me, in my brain, was a SharePoint hack. And there's a couple of reasons on that, okay? First of all, it negated authentication. It did. If you look at it, basically what it did is the Trojan that got in there basically said, well, you're not going to need authentication. So what it did is exposed every enterprise that had over-privileged accounts, because they took advantage of enterprises with sloppy IAM, and sloppy's not an insult, it's just saying it is, okay? But they weren't governed, they didn't, they were over-privileged, there was remaining ghost and orphan accounts around that they took control of, were in those systems for an extended amount of time, months and then years, okay? That's the problem of the SharePoint hack. It took advantage of the way we're doing identity practices. It negated authentication because people have a false sense of security and authentication, which, what we say at YouAttest. And then what they did is got in there and it went through the accounts. So to me, it was a SharePoint hack. Not only that, they targeted who they went after. It was, I got to say it straight out, it was Chinese nation states targeting energy companies and entities in the U.S. and Europe, including the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission. So that's, to me, it was the 2025 SharePoint hack.
Yeah, when somebody calls you and says, hey, I want access to everything, say no. It's okay to say no. And the best thing to do is align to the title or the role that you have assigned to a human. So never grant access based on, hey, we hired Bobby and now we got Paul coming in, and so you should make sure that Paul has the same level of access like Bobby. That's not where the alignment needs to be. The alignment needs to be with your actual job title and a predefined listing of systems, what level of access to those systems for that role is necessary, and anything and everything above that needs to have those additional approval levels. Mike, anything to add?
Yeah, I've seen this at numerous clients recently. SharePoint privileges are just way more than they should be for convenience. And just, if you're not sure what to give out, why not just give all access to everything out, which can lead to problems. And also, when you're not using role-based access controls with a platform like SharePoint, it might work okay when you're really small, but it's not going to work well when you're bigger. And I think every company wants to get bigger. So
yeah,
that's all I've got.
All right, Garret. So next question. What is the most impactful GRC-related advice that you have ever received?
I remember it was like yesterday. It was a couple years back. I was sitting in there, I was getting into this GRC stuff, and there was this presenter with a great voice and easy manner called Karina Klever, and got up there and said straight out, only execute on the controls that are relevant to you. Mm-hmm. And I was looking at this, and at that time I was, writing all these spreadsheets on how YouAttest mapped to 853 and mapped to CSF 1.1 and to ISO 27001. And I was like, how do people ever do this? How do they manage to do their enterprise? And then Karina got up there and talked about why GRC is failing, why people are not looking at the controls and saying, this is what's relevant. And it vibed completely with the way I see things, which is you start with your data and you work out. And that's what Karina said. So that was the most impactful for me, but in my mental transition from a security person to someone who talks and works in the GRC world, is don't be overwhelmed by the frameworks, don't be overwhelmed by the regulations, focus on your enterprise, and then map what you do to the controls instead of trying to, meet every control. That was the advice.
Well, I really appreciate that, Garret. And I have to say you've made a huge transition over the last several years. So that is wonderful to see how you're acknowledging that access control kind of plays such an important part in this bigger picture, and implementing GRC, yes, bottom up as well as top down, and regulations are there for guidance, right? I'm sorry, frameworks are there for guidance. Regulations you have to do, but a lot of them you can calmly say, this doesn't apply to me because this isn't my business, or this isn't my size, or this isn't my industry. So definitely appreciate that shout out, and that's kind of what we're trying to do, is definitely make an impact in the industry. Mike?
Yeah, I agree with Garret. Like when I hear people talking about control selection, that little bubble showing Karina pops up over my head. I'm like, Karina's the control selection person. And that's really, it's so important to get right. It's not easy, but I also think it's a big area where the expertise, the human expertise, will stay relevant, even with AI coming on board. Because if anyone seeing this has used AI as part of doing either a control mapping as part of for a company, control selection for a company, or maybe even control mapping from one framework to another, AI is not good at it. And if you just trust it to select controls for your company, it's going to be a world of hurt. So really, really good answer. And then to build on that advice, Garret, you've clearly excelled in this field. You've been having success for a long time, including your founding SecureAuth, exiting SecureAuth, success everywhere you go. What's something that allows you to stand out, and why is that?
I honestly believe it's my engineering and sales engineering days. I just want to know how things work, and I spend a lot of time in multiple meetings. You can look at my calendar of the 10, 11 meetings I do today. Multiple ones I dedicate to my inside team and the engineering guys, and taking what I know and then listening to them. Garret, you don't understand. The workflow really has to go this way. This is the way the integration really has to go. Garret, this is how the protocol actually works. So that's all in my brain. So then when I go and I talk and I sit on, maybe a more high level meeting, I can say, great, this is how this would execute, or no, that's pure fantasy. And that's a lot of this stuff that I'm doing now around the AI GRC. I go, okay, this can be integrated. The workflow for AI GRC is possible because I've understand and helped build the GRC for the other components.
Yeah, ever since day one of meeting you, Garret, I always realized quickly that you're really good at using technology for the benefit of businesses and thinking from a business perspective when developing and marketing and implementing your technology all the way. So it's really awesome to see. Karina, without further ado, we're down to the fifth and final question. If you want to take it away.
Last question. So Garret, what is the one top thing that a business can do today to strengthen their cyber GRC?
It sounds obvious since that's what computers were all, built for. So we stopped using abacuses to add numbers, but it's automation. It's just still not happening. There are still a lot of manual processes. Now, I'm real partial to the user access review process because that's what I built a product to do for, but it's almost a textbook case of how automation has not saturated and penetrated the minds of everyone, that we'd still feel it is acceptable to have someone work their Saturdays and Sundays going over Excel spreadsheets and sending out lists. And I'll give you guys a hint for 2026. That's what I want to do for AI GRC as well. Because I talked to literally wonderful auditors, really, decent auditors who are just got off like an ISO 4201 or a AI RMF framework. And they said, Garret, we wound up making up the data, okay? Because they didn't have the governance during the process. So that's where I see it. We got to automate. We got to automate our legacy systems. We have to automate the new AI models that we're building and deploying.